Let's talk about capacity, velocity, and load. So most of the agile teams, when they talk about capacity, velocity, and load, they are often confused. So today, let's talk about capacity, velocity, load in their simple terms. Let's first talk about capacity. Capacity is how many story points available for a specific iteration. So that means in any given 2 week time box or 3 week time box iteration, we call it as how many story points this team can deliver up to. So that's very important point here. How many story points you can deliver up to in a given iteration. And this number changes from iteration to iteration. So we'll calculate capacity a little bit later. So let's define them first. So let's define another term called velocity. So velocity is not same as capacity. So velocity is defined as the number of story points the team has delivered in the past. So typically we take 5 to 6 previous iterations and see how many story points they delivered in the past few iterations, take an average of that. So average story points in the past few iterations delivered by this team is velocity. So velocity is different from capacity, and velocity can be more or less than capacity. Now let's talk about load. So load, another number again in story points. So load is a portion of the iteration capacity the team is willing to commit in the given time box. And it is expressed typically in a percentage. So my load is 80% of the capacity. That means my capacity is 100 points. We are only loading 80% of that 80 story points. Typically, matured agile teams load more percentage than a not so mature team. So we'll talk about load also. And when we start calculating capacity in a safe context, there is a technique called normalization technique. We use it. But there's a big caution here. So some of the agile folks do not like this concept of normalization, and they just want to depend on the velocity. But you can use this technique, normalization technique, only if you do not have established velocity. So do not use normalization if you already have established velocity, teams have been sprinting, you have a consistent established velocity. Do not use normalization technique at all. All right, if that is the case, why we normalize? In SAFe, typically the product managers come up with the features, and then they do not know upfront which team is going to work on what feature. And sometimes in SAFe, in a multi-team environment, more than one team can contribute to delivery of one feature. So, but looking at from the perspective of the product manager at the organization level, we need to know a consistent way of estimating so that they can commit to the customers when this particular feature will be delivered. So that's why we normalize in SAFe. So there is a technique called normalization technique. So this is how we calculate the capacity normalization technique. We calculate everything is in story points. The capacity is in story points. 1 point per person per team. 1 point per person per day. So if there are 10 days in a sprint, in a 2-week sprints, so one person brings in 10 points. And we calculate only 8 points. So we calculate only 80% of that person's capacity. Why? Typically, in a given 2-week sprints, so day one is gone for the sprint iteration planning, and there are daily stand-ups every day, and then at the end you have iteration review and retrospective. Typically 2 days of the 10 days are gone, so we calculate only 80% of the capacity per a given resource. So in this example that you see on the video here, so we have assembled a team of 5 developers, 3 testers, 1 BA, 1 Scrum Master, 1 product owner. This is a typical team, just a sample. So we have 5 developers, so 5 times 8 is 40. And we have 3 testers, 3 times 8 is 24. And BAs, Scrum Masters, product owners, we do not calculate the capacity because they're not really calculating, they don't have their fingers on the keyboard, so they are not directly contributing to the user story development. So if you add up all these numbers, you get the raw capacity. In this case, raw capacity is 64 story points. And then I just made up the story. So there are 2 vacation days for 2 people, so 4 days vacation. And then we need to subtract the holidays also. So in this example, we have seen, let's assume that iteration falls on the first 2 weeks of July. So July 4th is a holiday, so everybody is out. So 5 developers and 3 testers are out. So -8. So the actual capacity in this example is 52 story points. So that's how you calculate the capacity using the normalization technique. Just to quick summary, 1 point per person per day. So you calculate only 8 points per person per sprint, 2-week sprints. And then that is your raw capacity. Do not calculate capacity for BS, Scrum Masters, and product owners. Subtract the vacation, subtract the holidays. You get the actual capacity using the normalization technique. Thank you.